Let me start by saying that I've been playing RuneScape for a long time. I've spent more of my life with RuneScape in it than I have without it. With that, it's hard to look back to the beginning and remember everything. What I do remember is limited. I remember it took me a week to figure out how to train prayer, because I somehow missed the dialogue about burying bones during Tutorial Island. I remember I quit my first account at level 11, and to this day I still can't remember the username. But what I definitely don't remember is how easy it was for me, an 11-year-old boy with little to no prior experience gaming, to figure out the fundamentals of how to play a game like RuneScape. Contrary to my monologuing, this video isn't actually about me and my first experiences with RuneScape. It's about my fiance's and her experiences with this wonderful game. I've always wanted to have a life partner who played RuneScape with me. However, my fiance never showed an interest. Outside of some Crash Bandicoot as a child and more recently enjoying a lot of Slime Rancher and Animal Crossing, my fiance doesn't play video games. So, I came to her with a proposal, an experiment. I would record her playing through RuneScape's tutorial, and would silently watch, giving as little to no guidance or feedback possible. I wanted to get as pure of an experience into the beginning of the game as I could, while documenting the experience. She agreed. This is a RuneScape experiment, introducing a non-gamer to RuneScape 3. After spending a solid 10 minutes deciding on outfit choices, she was finally prompted to enter the lovely world of Gielinor. Already, we had a problem. My fiance's tutorial began in Berthorpe, and quickly overwhelmed her with a slew of information. RuneScape 3's UI is great, being fully customizable and very fluid. However, as a new player, it can be completely overwhelming. My fiance found herself struggling just to understand the basics at first, being introduced to so many different UI elements at once: inventory, skills, chat, minimap, tasks, equipment. It was all a bit too much. After a while, she was able to filter out what was happening and focus on what the game was trying to tell her to do. However, it wasn't always clear. I noticed, in an attempt to clear out excess information, my fiance would tunnel vision towards the center of the screen, which led to numerous occasions of her completely missing tutorial prompts as they would be sitting off to the sides. More than a few times I had to inform her that she needed to click on a UI element or something that was glowing and trying to get her attention. My prior experience as a QA tester for AAA games has led me to a certain opinion on tutorials for games. With a complex game such as RuneScape, there's a balance that must be struck between not overwhelming the player and not leaving them bored. The Berthorpe tutorial doesn't accomplish this. With every UI element being upfront and accessible from the beginning, players can often get overloaded, frustrated, and distracted. At a random point in the tutorial, my fiance got distracted and began fletching logs she had cut down. She ended up with unstrung shortbows, but couldn't comprehend why she couldn't string them. The left-click option on unstrung shortbow is string, logically, but she didn't have the bowstring or the faintest idea how to get it. She got exceedingly frustrated with the fact that she was allowed to make an unstrung shortbow, but not allowed to string it and thus complete the bow. She was interacting with something the game had not explained to her. The open-endedness of the tutorial meant she could run off and do whatever she wanted, whenever she wanted, regardless of how far along the tutorial's path she was. I thought surely the game would start explaining the basic mechanics of fletching to her once she started fletching, but this never happened. So instead, we got this.
Why is that the way that is? I suppose what I would like to know is how to fucking string that bow, but whatever. Why can I make a bow and not make the string at the same time?
I also found that many important aspects of the game were buried in dialogue trees or otherwise not easily found, and thus easily missable. My fiance stumbled upon the explanation for what the tool belt is and how to use it entirely by accident, something that could be completely missed by any new player. As a disclaimer, I did learn that Tutorial Island does exist. However, it seems to be on a rotation. It's a random chance that you get Tutorial Island or not when you create a new account. Apparently, this is so Jagex can gauge how well each tutorial does when it comes to player retention for new players. Understandable, except Tutorial Island introduces the player to new concepts gradually. UI interfaces are added to the screen as they're explained, not all at once, and then explained later. Concepts like tool belts are explained, and you cannot interact with anything that isn't part of the tutorial. You cannot skip ahead or get sidetracked, keeping a new player focused. On top of this, once you leave Tutorial Island, you're dropped into the Berthorpe tutorial anyway, where further concepts such as advanced combat, slayer, fletching, crafting, etc. are explained. This feels like the superior tutorial. going through the relatively quick but very structured tutorial island to learn the utmost basics of the game, then get dropped into the more open-ended Birthorpe tutorial to learn the finer details at your own pace. Skipping one and going straight to the other leads to the issues my fiancé experienced: confusion, discouragement, and frustration. One big complaint my fiancé expressed to me is that there was no way to replay tutorial pieces. If she didn't understand something the game explained to her, there was no way to have that lesson repeated. In games like Slime Rancher, every tutorial dialog box can be reopened and reread whenever the user wants. She couldn't find a way to do this in RuneScape, and so she struggled with some things, as the explanation didn't always stick the first time. This isn't to say she didn't have fun. The game's classic dry wit had her giggling more than a few times, and she thoroughly enjoyed how pretty the game was. She, however, did admit after the recording that there were numerous times where she was so utterly lost or confused on her objective that she felt like quitting. Tutorials, as tedious as they can be for some of us, need to be able to keep a new player focused, as being lost or confused in what should arguably be the simplest part of the game doesn't paint a very optimistic picture for the player's experiences moving forward. Despite all of this, she did manage to get through the Birthorpe tutorial, crafting herself a set of wizard robes and challenging the big bad troll magic stick. At this point, I had to give the tutorial credit, as a hero NPC tanked all of the hits for her, giving my fiancé time to learn combat in an environment where death wasn't breathing down her neck. The boss introduced a simple mechanic. When he brings up his shield, use the Confuse spell on him to break it down so you can continue to damage him. She was able to figure this out very quickly, almost immediately clicking the Confuse spell in her spellbook and clicking the troll. The fight went off without a hitch, and she learned a very basic mechanic of bossing. With the Birthorpe tutorial more or less completed, my fiancé was given a choice. She could take a small boat to Lumbridge, or stay in the Birthorpe area, completing quests and tasks in the region. She chose to stay, and at this point I allowed myself to guide her if she needed it. Strangely enough, the first thing she stumbled upon was summoning. Ending up at the summoning obelisk in Taverley, she talked to the summoning tutor, and was guided through the process of making a summoning pouch. Ultimately, she just decided to click on anything that had a blue outline on it when she hovered her mouse over it. This led to her learning about herb lore and completing the Druidic Ritual quest with absolutely no input from me. Finding out how to train summoning, herb lore, and even completing a quest on her own was impressive, and more in line with how I expected this experiment to go when it started. It was most likely due to her acclimating to how the game functions, but the first few hours were rough, and if it weren't for the fact that this was an experiment, and she knew I needed her to complete the tutorial, she would have most likely quit a long time ago and never touched the game again. So after all this, what was learned? I learned that RS3 has two separate tutorials, and they both fail to achieve their goal in properly preparing a new player for their game. However, together I believe they can achieve exactly what's needed. As I stated before, sending players to this short yet structured tutorial island is a great way to introduce players to key concepts like UI, skills, combat, navigation, etc. Then sending them off to Birthorpe to improve upon those key concepts with more skills, advanced UI, advanced combat, etc. could sufficiently cover enough of the core of RuneScape to allow new players to fill in the gaps on their own, without being completely overwhelmed with information or left clueless. I learned that while blinking UI elements might seem obvious to some, to others it might go unnoticed, putting prompts in the middle of the screen that then direct a player to the part of the UI that the game wants them to interact with ensures critical information doesn't get unintentionally missed. And finally, I learned that while the wiki is indeed a thing, the game could definitely use some way to re-access tutorial information and explanations on how things work. It might be that this does indeed exist somewhere in the game, but I am unaware of it, and new players definitely don't have it pointed out to them. And that concludes my RuneScape experiment, and exposing a total novice to a game like RuneScape. Oh, and I forgot to mention, in case anyone was wondering, no, she hasn't quit, and wants to continue playing, with my help, of course. Well, anyway, if you've made it this far, thank you all so much for watching. Goodbye.